If you have trouble hearing me, just let me know and I'll speak up a little louder than a whisper. In one of the colleges I went to, we had to train to whisper so that the director sitting in the back upper balcony could hear us whisper on stage. My wife thinks it's totally crazy because she says you talk way too loud. But if I wanted to pass, I had to be able to whisper so you could hear me. I'm trying to get to my Bible, and I'm really having troubles getting there for some reason. Maybe there I am. Not there yet, but anyway, close to it. I was mumbling there. Yeah. We're going to have a lot of fun with chapter 41. Hopefully you've read it. And if you've read it, I know you have questions. Because I don't believe a person can read chapter 41 of Job and not come up with at least 47 questions. Yeah. And after class, we'll have more than that. Now, there's some things that we read in the Bible and that teaches us totally wrong. You say, well, how in the world is that? I have a translation here. It's called New Living Translation. And it's a commentary in the form of a Bible. Now, through my years, and I'm 73 and I've been around for a couple of years, there have been people who have fussed at me because I did not stay exactly quoting the King James Version of the Bible. Now, you may be one of those people who prefer the King James Bible. I like the King James Bible. I prefer it. Driving from Bentonville over to here this morning, I listened to the King James Bible. And the reason that I listened to it is because of Alexander Scourby. Have you ever heard of an actor, a stage actor, not TV, but a stage actor by the name of Alexander Scourby? He recorded the entire Bible. And his accent is not Arkansas, it's not Oklahoma, it's not that messed up Texas stuff down there. And I say messed up Texas stuff, and I'll divert just a moment. I do construction work. We have a construction company going on over there. My crew is working at Bentonville in building those Walmart home office buildings, always looking for employees. But I hired a guy who was born and raised in Siberia, not for this project, for another one. We do a lot of hospitals. But he was born and raised in Siberia. He moved over here with his mama and had been here for probably 6, 7 years. He learned the English language pretty good. And he and I spent more time talking than we did working. But in Siberia, when he was talking in his Russian language, he had a speech impediment. He learned English, lived in Dallas, and he spoke perfect English. I came to the conclusion that either he was born on the wrong side of the world and he should have been born over here, which would have allowed him to speak English with no speech impediment, or all Texans speak with a speech impediment, and he just fit right in. It's probably the latter. Probably the latter. Anybody here from Texas? Oh boy. I knew it when I started that story. I knew I was going to get myself in trouble. There's a lot of excellent translations of the Bible. And the King James Version is an extremely good translation. It may not be the best, but we've been raised up listening to it, and it fits in well, kind of like wearing a good pair of gloves that's been worn in. But there are some translations which are closer, but very difficult to read, and that's because whether you're reading in the Old Testament or in the New Testament, they talk different than we do over here. They put their syllables in the wrong places. They put their nouns before their verbs and all this messed up stuff. And I learned English. I finally learned English after learning Greek and French and a smattering of Hebrew. Finally, I figured English out. English is really an extremely difficult language, especially when you're raised on a farm in a school that class that you're in got less than 12 people and no library. And the English teacher was new every year because we ran the English teachers off every year. And they had to hire a new one every time. So there are things that we read that we've got to go back and study to see what it says. Now I'm going to read to you the first sentence of chapter 41 to make a point. And I'm reading it out of this New Living Translation. Yeah, that's it. Can you catch a crocodile with a hook or put a noose around its jaw? In that first sentence, we've already got a major translation problem. Those who translated Job chapter 41, we're going to spend a few Sundays on Job chapter 41 because it's even more difficult than Job 40 for those who have a little bit of a problem with reading these two chapters. It says, can you catch a crocodile? Is it really a crocodile? The Hebrew is Leviathan. Now we saw last week Behemoth was in chapter 40. That was the animal being described, Behemoth. And that meant what? A terrible monster. Leviathan, by definition, is a ferociously, extremely terrible monster. Even more horrifying than Behemoth. And Behemoth would have been pretty bad. But look at Leviathan. What in the world is a Leviathan? Now we were just discussing out here just a few moments ago how little we know about the world in which we live. Very, very little. How much do we know about what's in the ocean? I know more about what's in the lake, Beaver Lake, than I know about what's in the ocean. I know that when we were in Jamaica doing a job, or Puerto Rico. Where were we? I don't remember where we were. Anyway, there was an ocean out there. And my son and my wife, they were getting out there in that ocean, and I thought, I really do not know what's in that thing. And as long as they stay where they belong, I'll stay where I belong. And we'll be real happy. Well, my wife had goggles on, and she came up face to face with I don't remember what it was, big fish. And my son was just hoping that she didn't move. And the fish finally lost interest and went on. It was not something I'd like to pull in, although I've pulled in a few big ones, but not out of the ocean. And so there's things there that we don't know about. There's a fish called a colunkus. And that colunkus, millions of years ago, that thing was extinct. Lo and behold, if somebody didn't pull one up, the Amazon River goes out into the Atlantic Ocean area toward that east, and they pulled one up. And it died. And now they pulled up a bunch of those things that have been extinct for millions of years. Now they're pulling them up. They were way down deep, and when they come up, they die because of the lack of the pressure is different. The lack of the pressure is not what their body was fit for. So now that fish that's been extinct for millions of years is no longer extinct. I read this 2 days ago about an animal, a funny looking hairy animal that was found in Indonesia that they said was extinct now for several decades. they're in the process and have been for some time of bringing back the Columbian mammoth. And that sounds like a pretty decent thing. An elephant is a pretty good thing to try to mix them together and bring them back. But there's animals, and I've read that there are more animals becoming unextinct than are becoming extinct today. Now, horny toads are almost extinct. My second favorite animal, horny toad. Raised up with those things on the farm and loved them. You turn them over and rub their belly and they're gone, just like a chicken. I'm sure most of you have rubbed the chicken bellies before and they'll go to sleep on you.
I've played with horny toads.
Yeah, those are fun. Love those things. But they're almost extinct. I've seen 2 in the last 10, 15 years. I used to have more than that in my pockets when I'd go in to eat dinner or lunch. It's called lunch. Mama would always check my pockets, see how many horny toads I was bringing into the house. She didn't like horny toads in the house. So there's things that are happening with the animals around us that we don't know about. And boy, are there some that we don't know about. Now, let's read this, not from this New Living Translation, because the word Leviathan there does not mean crocodile, and we're going to see that it does not mean crocodile. Let me see if I can find my Bible here. This is terrible. Had it when I walked in the door. Let's see if this is it. No, not it. Wrong way. There it is. Turn. Yeah, that's the way you're supposed to do it. Well, just lost that thing again. That's the bad thing about having. You're going to have to read it for yourself, I think. Yeah. All right, can you pull in Leviathan with a fish hook? Verse 1, chapter 41. Or tie down its tongue with a rope. Can you put a cord through its nose or pierce its jaw with a hook? Now this is God talking. Who's God talking to? Job. Why is God talking to Job? Why is God asking Job all these answers? Because Job don't know. And God is proving to Job that Job, you're not as smart as you think you are. It's kind of like God saying, Glen, you ain't near as smart as you think you are. And I already know it. I already know I ain't as smart as I used to think I was, because I was smarter than my daddy until I went to college. And found out he was a whole lot smarter than I was. I was so proud. Daddy, going to get that PhD. And he said, I thought you already was a post-hole digger. He was extremely smart. So God is saying, Job, can you catch a Leviathan? Can you pull him out with a fish hook? Or tie down his tongue with a rope? What do we know from that passage right there? Job had a rope and this thing had a tongue. See, whenever you're reading it, at least look and see what he's talking about. There's a description. And so if you wind up with an animal with no tongue, it's probably not going to be Leviathan. Can you put a cord through its nose or pierce its jaw with a hook? Job, will it keep begging you for mercy? Job, will it speak to you with gentle words? What's the answer to all of these? No. No, it's not. It ain't a gonna. Would you take him as a slave for the rest of its life? Can you make this thing work for you, Job, like a bull, an ox, or a horse, or a mule? The answer is no. Verse 5, Job, can you make a pet of it like a bird? Or put it on a leash for your daughters in your house? You think God don't have a sense of humor? Read that passage again. God's got a really good, he's describing this ferocious animal. He says, Job, you want to take him home kind of like a Shih Tzu puppy? No, Job, you ain't going to do that either. Will traders barter for it? Will they divide it up, slice him up, cut him, serve it in their restaurants? Now, let's go back to what we read there in that international translation where it says, can you catch a crocodile? Have you ever eaten alligator tail?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So we know from that we're not talking about an alligator or a crocodile, because they do cut them up and they do sell them and you do eat them in the restaurants. So we know that's not what it's talking about. But I read that right here in the Bible. See, that looks like a Bible. I read it right there to you. And it does say Holy Bible right there on the front. But it's a commentary in the form of a Bible. So be careful what you read of the different translations. You've got to be careful. Now, this thing here, this cell phone, has really, really, really made it easy for you to become an expert in ancient literature. I had to go to school to learn it. Now my grandson, when I have to ask him, Brant, can you fix this for me? Can you tell me how to do this thing? He gets more here than I could find in the entire library at the University of Oklahoma. And I lived in that library at the University of Oklahoma. I took my own light bulb because where I had to go study, nobody else went there. And I hate to tell it, but whenever they would say, all right, library's closing, I'd reach up there and turn the light bulb off until everybody would leave, and I'd put the light bulb back on. I had to keep studying. But you can get it right here. There's a dozen different places that I know of, and they'll give you 15, 20 different translations. Read the different translations, and you're smart. Figure it out. What's it talking about? You can do that because if you've got 10 of them that says this is talking about a particular thing and describe it, you got one way over here, some harebrained idea like Glen writing his own translation, you'd say, I don't know about that fella over there. He's a little off on the left side there. So these things are handy. And also, I don't have to wear a wristwatch anymore. See if I can make it go what I want to do. Can you fill its head with fish spears? Verse 7. Verse 8. If you lay a hand on it, you will remember the struggle and never do it again. You ever watch? No, it's not Crocodile Dundee. See, I put Moses onto the ark and all that. What's that other guy's name over there in Australia that was the alligator handler?
Steve Irwin.
Yeah. You can put an alligator nose under your chin and hold it, keep him from opening. Now, you can't keep him from closing it, but you can keep him from opening it because his muscles are not strong opening. His muscles are all in one direction. So he says, put a big Band-Aid around his mouth and you carry that thing around like a suitcase. He says, if you lay a hand on it, you'll remember the struggle and never do it again. Any hope of subduing it is false. Read that. Any hope of subduing it is false. When I was a kid and lived out in Eunice, New Mexico, my dad worked for Halliburton. And on the way home from school, we walked back and forth to school. It was 6 miles uphill going to school. And it was 6 miles going uphill coming home from school in the desert. There was a guy there, had to be totally crazy because he had little baby alligators. and the kids would all walk by and, kick that little alligator he got out of his little cage. Little baby alligators. Now, I don't know why this guy was raising baby alligators, but he had a lot of them, and they were fun. You didn't want to bite your finger, but they were fun to play with a little bit until he came out and told the kids, get out of here. Now, any hope of subduing it is false. So we're not talking about an alligator or crocodile. Verse 9, the mere sight of it is horrible, terrible. You'll faint. You'll faint dead away. If one come crawling, whatever, through the back door, we'd put holes through this door trying to get out. Scare the living daylights out of you, just if one comes close to you. Who then, God says? Here's his point. Here's the whole point of chapter 38, 39, 40, and 41. God says, Job, if nobody can stand before my little pet animal, who can stand before me? There's the point. So why in the world is God talking to Job about animals, behemoth, Leviathan? Why? To show Job and us, as a consequence of it, that we're just not even close to God. Therefore, who has a claim against God that I must pay, he says. That's his point. Why the whole book of Job? There it is. Now, there was a lot of other things we learned, but here it is. God says, here's my point. Now, everything under heaven belongs, God says, to me. Everything. Everything under heaven belongs to God. Now, that creates a problem. Because a lot of times we think we're the big boy on the block. But we're not. We're definitely not. It's God. Now, if God is in control of behemoth and Leviathan and a kangaroo and a mad bull, then God is stronger than me. God is more powerful than me. Chapter 38 and chapter 39 shows that God's a whole lot smarter than we are. What's the purpose of hail? What's the purpose of rain? Well, yeah, we get a lot of good benefits from that. I got some real good benefit from hailstorm that I went through. It was a big tornado forming and got a hailstorm. Just beat my pickup all to pieces. The insurance company says it's the worst they'd ever seen. They just bought it from me. And I said, well, I want my pickup back. And they said, okay, give me $2,000 and the pickup's yours. It's got a brand new motor, ain't they? Didn't know that. So I bought my pickup back for $2,000. That hailstone, that was trying to really get that metal ready for somebody to beat it back into place. But I got my pickup back for $2,000. And that thing has made me over $2,000 a month because I'm renting it out. Well, we're not going to go into all that. But that's not why God created hail, though I thank him a lot for it. Because my personal car is not my pickup. That's just like a tractor. My personal car is different. Very different. The purpose of rain. God says it's for the day of battle. Were you aware of that? I didn't know a thing about that until I read it. Being a history teacher, I went back and started looking at battles. During the Civil War, more rain. Why? Why was there so much rain during the period of the Civil War? God says it was reserved for the day of battle. Why did Napoleon have so much problem with rain? God says it reserved for the day of battle. Who's in control of that rain? God. Well, if God's in control of rain, snow, hail, He should be in control of me and you. And just because I don't understand it, that don't mean it's not true. Job did not understand a lot of those things in chapter 38 and 39 that God asked him questions of. And finally, at the end of 39, Job says, okay, I'm not going to say another word. You proved your point. And God says, oh no, I'm not through with you yet. Let's talk about Behemoth over there, chapter 40, which we did last week. Now, but this one, in chapter 41, God says, I've got a lot of things to say about this one. So God proved his point here, and he says, now we're going to go ahead and we're going to look at this thing in detail. There's some things about Leviathan that are very, very unusual. That's to say the least. Chapter 13. Well, back up the latter part there of verse 12. He's going to talk about his limbs, its strength, and its graceful form. Verse 13, who can strip off its outer coat? Who can penetrate the double coat of armor? Well, we know some things here about this. This thing has really got some tough skin. It's going to have a little bit of a problem cutting him up. It's going to have a little bit of problem throwing a harpoon and making it stick. It's going to have a whole lot of problems getting anything to penetrate this thing. Verse 14, who dares to open the doors of its mouth? What does that tell you about its mouth? We're looking for some descriptions.
Strong.
Right. Big. Yeah. Doors. I'm going to go through the door. But when we leave, we're going to go through the doors, plural. So whenever he's talking about the doors of his mouth, that's like opening double doors. Not a single door, but double doors. So this thing's got a big mouth. We figured that one out here. Verse 15. I lost part of it here. Somebody better read that. Read verse 15 for me, somebody.
His back is made of 2 rows of shields, shut up closely as with a seal.
Okay, what is he talking about? Right, shields. These are shields. Now, he's not talking about the scales on his body. How do we know that? Those of you who've already read ahead. How do you know we're not talking about the scales on his body? Because he's going to talk about that in the next couple of verses. Well, then if he's talking about the scales on his body a little later, here he's talking about his shields. What's the shields?
Protection.
Louder, I'm hard to hear.
Protection.
Okay. Going down the back, if you've studied any of these dinosaur things, you've got the one in particular was, I'd forgotten all about this one till just now. In Ireland or Scotland, I believe it was Scotland. Trying to remember when it was. 1400 something. Can't remember. Wow, that's terrible when you get old and forget things. I'll figure it out. But anyway, a veterinarian was out walking early one morning, and he saw an animal that he'd never seen before, never heard of before. Now, for a veterinarian, that would be kind of unusual because that's their study, is animals. He described this thing from its nose all the way to the end of its tail. Said it had a head, quote, somewhat like that of a horse. walked on 4 legs, short stubby legs. Its body was like a low hill. I'm trying my best to remember the exact quote here, and I'm getting close on some of them. Had shields on its back. Had a tail that sloped as it neared the end. Trying to think if there was anything else he said about this, describing it. Can't think of any more. On dinosaurs, what is the only dinosaur that has a head shaped like a horse's head? Come on, you know that one. That's it's like teaching college all over again.
Dinosaurs Rex.
All right. A stegosaurus. Look at it. When you get home today, look at a stegosaurus. A stegosaurus has a head shaped like a horse's head. Now, a stegosaurus also has 4 short stubby legs, has a body like a hill, has shields on its back, and has a tail that's big at the base and slopes to the point. What do you think that veterinarian saw that morning in 1492? Oh, 1492, okay. What do we remember? What do we remember about 1492? No, the veterinarian discovered that stegosaurus. Columbus was just out getting lost. Don't get me on Columbus. Real quick. Over sidestep. Columbus left and was going to go to the Far East. Where he left out, if he had gone straight to the west, it would have been a whole lot faster. Here's the globe. It would have been a lot faster to start up here and go around. Instead, what did Columbus do? Why did he make a detour and turn left? Because the previous year he'd been up in the Viking territory studying their maps for a full year. He knew there was an island there. He was trying to get around that big island, which is where we're at right now. Okay, that's another link. That's another class, somewhere or other, not here. Be careful. I'm like a hunting dog. And you say, squirrel. And I'll jump and go that direction. So be careful there. All right. That veterinarian in Scotland saw and described an animal which in that period of time had never been talked about before. He saw and described in detail a stegosaurus. So, question, well, do you mean stegosauruses were alive in 1400s? Well, you figure it out. You're smart. If a veterinarian can describe an unknown animal perfectly, either he needs to go to the casinos and get all the money out of the casinos, or else he saw a stegosaurus. Well, I don't believe they were around then. Well, that's your problem, not his problem, not my problem. For 100 years, they thought the Colunkus fish were extinct. Found out it wasn't. We can go off into that area, but we're not gonna. We're not gonna. The whole point was there's animals running around that we're not familiar with. And there's some running around right now today that we're not real familiar with. Fire-breathing animals. Have you ever eaten an animal that can breathe fire? Come on, either up and down or Have you ever eaten an animal that has the capability of breathing fire? Yes, you have. You ever eat a hamburger? What? You mean a cow can breathe fire? Yeah, that's exactly what I mean. Well, I ain't never seen one. Well, I was 16 years old. I never seen one either until 2 of our show calves got off on the alfalfa and ate the alfalfa. And you know what happens to a calf that has not been trained to eat alfalfa, don't you? Come on, we got some farmers in here. What happens? They blow up. And so what do? Well, you leave them alone, they die. Poke a hole in them, yeah. Take a knife, poke a hole in the side of them, and yep, and they go. I've been eating alfalfa. My mother and I and my brother were out burning trash that day when that all happened. And those two pets, of course, when they get hurting, what are they going to do? They're going to come to us because we're their pets. They thought we were the pets. And so my mama said, run, hey, get a section of garden hose. Ran, got a garden hose, took her knife out, chopped off a section about like that, took that and stuck it down that throat of that calf. And oh, the stinking smell. And she pulled, where it'd been burning matches, pulled out, lit it on the end of the fire, about like that. I didn't know that would happen at all. There's some things that we're going to spend time in chapter 41. And I hope that we're getting you to where you want to go look at some of this stuff. All right. How do I get that thing to move?
The button on the right.
On the right. Here's an animal that most people are not familiar with. It's a gecko. It has capabilities of shooting slime out of its points in its tail, not just the end of its tail, but points in its tail, kind of like a leaking water hose. I didn't know that existed, did you? What about a bombardment beetle? 212 degrees when it shoots out these two chemicals, they come together, 212 degrees. Did you know about a bombardment beetle? Or a bombardier beetle? No. So we need to go study some of these animals that are running around today, and we're not even familiar with, folks. Excuse me. That's my personal car. That's a 36 Packard. It looks like a 36 Packard. If I drive up here one day and you see that, you'll know it's me. It's modern motor, modern transmission, modern running gears. It's in the shop right now having an air conditioning system and a heating system. Never had a heater in it before. So anyway, I've been collecting cars since I was 15. Still have my first one, which was a 29 Model A coupe. Just couldn't part with it. Kind of like my wife, just can't part with her. So anyway, I hope that you go home and get the Bible out and read chapter 41, because we're going to look at some things here in this description that's going to knock your socks off. There's some things about this particular animal that you're going to look at and you're going to say, no way. But you would look at a bombardier beetle and say, there's no way a little bug can shoot chemicals up there and hit their target and hit them at 212 degrees temperature. That's impossible. But yet there are. But I've never seen one. That don't matter. Just because I've never seen one, which is probably a good thing, because if I'd have seen one, I'd probably reach down and tried to grab the thing. Curiosity killed the cat. Gets you in trouble too if you ain't a cat. And that lizard that can shoot slime out onto you from the points in its tail, goodness, that's terrible. We used to think snapping turtles were bad. Yeah, we learned real fast, stay away from snapping turtles. At 3 years old, I learned to stay away from a rattlesnake. Because my uncle says, no, they're fun. He'd reach down and grab the tail of one real fast and then pop it and pop its head off. I asked him one time when I grew a little older and realized that was not a real smart thing. I said, what happens if it don't, or if it comes back and you haven't snapped its head off? He said, well, you better learn to run fast. There's things out there that we just don't know. Before you hit that thing. When was the first computer designed? You think you know? Oh, there's all kinds of stuff. The computer, okay. When was the first computer that we know of was designed? Go look that one up. Then we'll talk about things we don't know anything about. And computers is one of them. The one found in the Greek ship that was buried on the bottom of the ocean, the computer, yeah, that'll get your mind all messed up. Go for it. Gotcha.